Hi everyone, you are welcome back to our weekly lesson study. My name is Lawrence, and this week we study lesson 10. Jesus opens the way through the veil. The memory text is from Hebrews chapter 9 verse 24, and it reads, "For Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us." So this week we focus on Jesus' ascension to heaven and its implication in the book of Hebrews. Before we get into the lesson, kindly subscribe to this channel for new lesson every week. Now, let's get started. In the Sunday's lesson, we study Jesus before the Father. In Hebrews 9:24, what was the purpose of Jesus' ascension to heaven? To appear before the Father with a better sacrifice, thus his own blood. To help understand this, let's look at the various feasts that God gave to Israel. God instructed Israel that their males should go 3 times every year up to Jerusalem to appear before the Lord with an offering. The appointed times were the Feast of Passover, that celebrated Israel's deliverance from Egypt; the Feast of Weeks, that celebrated the barley harvest; the Feast of Booths, that celebrated God's care for Israel during their sojourn in the desert. According to the New Testament, all the Old Testament feasts also have prophetic significance, and that Jesus fulfills them all with accuracy. Again, Hebrews tells us that Jesus ascended to heaven to appear before God with a better sacrifice. In the lesson, the purpose of pilgrimage in ancient Israel was to behold the face of God, meaning to experience God's favor, and this is the sense in Hebrews of Jesus' ascension. Now, in the Monday's lesson, we study God's invitation. Read Hebrews chapter 12 verses 18 to 21. What was the experience of Israel at Mount Sinai? When God called Israel from Egypt, his plan was to create a personal relationship with them. So through Moses, God gave the necessary instructions to prepare the people to meet with him. Those who ascended to the foot of the mountain without preparation would die. Nevertheless, once the people had prepared themselves for 2 days, then when the trumpet sounds on the 3rd day, God instructed that the people shall come up to the mountain. The people later recognized that they had seen God's glory and that it was possible for God to speak with man. But when the moment came, they lacked faith. God's manifestation of his holiness at Mount Sinai was to teach the people important lessons, to teach them to learn to fear or respect him. 2. To teach them that he is merciful and gracious. But while God wanted Israel to come to him, the people became afraid and requested Moses to be their intermediary. God did not want his people to be afraid of him, but the people felt fear because they had no faith. In the Tuesday's lesson, we study the need for a veil. The earthly sanctuary had several veils: the veil that went around the whole yard for the tent, and the veil that separated the tent from the yard outside, and third, the veil that hung between the holy place and the most holy place in the tent. These 3 veils were both entrances and boundaries that only some people could cross. Also, the veil was a protection for the priests as they ministered before a holy God. In the lesson, the Levites camped around the tabernacle so that there may be no wrath on the people of Israel. Thus, they were a kind of human veil that protected the people of Israel. Jesus, our high priest, also has been our veil. And through his incarnation, God pitched his tent in our midst and made it possible for us to contemplate his glory. In the Wednesday's lesson, we study the new and living way through the veil. Read Hebrews chapter 10 verses 19 to 22. What invitation do we have in this passage? We are invited to draw near to God with a sincere heart. Thus, Jesus has entered into the heavenly sanctuary and invites us to follow his lead. The new and living way refers to the new covenant that Jesus inaugurated with his sacrifice and ascension. This new way is different from the old agreement because it has provided forgiveness of sins and has put the law in our hearts. It also has made it possible for us to approach God with confidence, not because of anything we have done, but only because of what Jesus has done for us. Hebrews noted that the purpose of the old covenant was to create an intimate relationship between God and his people. So God commanded that a sanctuary be built so that he could live among them. The inauguration of the sanctuary and God's presence in the midst of his people marked the moment when the covenant between God and Israel was completed. The same is true of the new covenant. The new covenant also implies the inauguration of Jesus' priestly ministry in our behalf. and it is Jesus who intercedes for us, and through him we have salvation. Now, in the Thursday's lesson, we study "They will see his face." Read Hebrews chapter 12 verses 22 to 24. In what sense have we arrived at the heavenly Jerusalem into the presence of God? It is argued that believers have come into Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem, through faith. Thus, the heavenly Jerusalem belongs to the realm of the things hoped for and not seen, but nevertheless assured to us through faith. We also have arrived at Mount Zion, in the very presence of God, through our representative Jesus. Jesus' ascension is not a matter of faith, but fact, and it encourages us to keep our trust in him and hold on to the things we believe. In short, Jesus' ascension marks the beginning of his rule and the beginning of his priestly ministry in our behalf. And lastly, his ascension marks the inauguration of the new covenant. Kindly read the Friday's further thoughts for more insight. Thanks for watching. My name is Lawrence.